Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. She was purifying herself from her monthly menstruation cycle. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David, saying, I am pregnant. So David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance of the palace with all of his master's servants, and did not go to his own house. David was told Uriah did not go home, so he asked Uriah, haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home? Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my Lord's own men are camped in the open country. How can I go to my house and eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. Then David said to him, stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went and slept on a mat among his master's servants. He did not go home. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it, he wrote, put Uriah out front where the fighting is fiercest, then withdraw from him so that he will be struck down and die. While Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army failed. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. Joab sent a full account of the battle. He instructed the messengers, quote, when you have finished giving the king the account of the battle, the king's anger may flare up, and he may ask, why did you get so close to the city to fight? Didn't you know that they will shoot arrows from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal? Didn't a woman drop an upper millstone on him from the wall so that he died in Thebez? Why did you get so close to the wall? If he asks you this, say to him, moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. The messengers set out, and when he arrived and told David everything Joab had sent him to say, the messenger said to David, the men overpowered us and came out against us in the open, but we drove them back to the entrance of the city gate. Then the archers shot arrows at your servant from the wall. Some of the king's men died. Moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. David told the messenger, say this to Joab, don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it. Say this to encourage Joab. Uriah's wife heard her husband was dead, and she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife. and bore a son, but the thing David had done displeased the Lord. That's a sad story. David is the villain in this story. And we all want to identify with David in Psalms 23 when he says, the Lord is my shepherd. You know, that's me. I'm identifying with David. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? David wrote that. I'm identifying with David. But how many of us can identify with David in this context when David is the villain? Here is the question. How do you handle power? That's the whole question that we're dealing with. How do we handle power? And I want us to think of power in terms of our relationships to people or to institutions. Because not many of us will have the power in terms of being the president of the United States. That's a position of power. Not many of us will be the governor of the state of Indiana. That's power. Not many of us will be the mayor of Lawrence or the mayor of Indianapolis. Those are positions of power. Not many of us will be the president of a Fortune 500 company, a position of power. But those are not the only power positions that people find themselves in. In interpersonal relationships, there is power arrangements. And it's interesting that the power arrangements that we have are based upon a hierarchical model. That is, somebody is always trying to be over someone else, which is a manifestation or a concept of power. And it even takes place as early as childhood. This whole question of power and hierarchy. And there are several different ranking metrics to determine what power is. What do you mean, Pastor? Here it is. When you're talking about hierarchical, that means top to bottom, relationships or arrangements, that means that you are relating to someone based upon where that person is in the hierarchical power arrangement dynamic. To make it a little bit more plain, there are different ranking metrics. For example, in the book of Genesis, when God created, it says, and God created male and female, created he them. You know, he created, and so the first expression of creation indicates in the Genesis narrative that God created us equal. Male and female created he them. It is not male over female, but it's male with female. And he breathed on them, and he told them to be fruitful and multiply. Not him, them, male and female, all of humanity. We were one, we were equal. There was no hierarchy, one person over the other, one person dominating the person beneath. No, that's not a part of God's original design for humanity. God's original design was for everybody to be equal across the board. Men were not up here and women were not down here. Women were not up here and men down here. No, they were on the same level. Equality. But what happened in the garden? The snake got involved. Now let me say a word about that. The snake was created by God just like everything else. God created the snake too, just like he had created everything else. In fact, the word says that God created the serpent more subtle and craftier than anything else. And when God finished his creation, what did God say? It is good. The serpent was there. It is good. The serpent, the snake, is a part of the story. And I think I tried to say last week that many of us get upset because the snake is a part of the story in our lives. The snake is a part of the story. You can't get through the story without the snakes. And so there are some folk who leave church, walk away from church. There are too many snakes there. Snakes have always been a part of the story. I mean, you leave the church and go to another church, snakes. You leave the church and say, I can't take the snakes and go join the Nation of Islam, snakes. I don't like the Nation of Islam. I'm going to go join the Black Hebrew Israelites, snakes. Forget about religion. I'm going to go home and be with my family, snakes. You can't get away from the snakes. The point, snakes are everywhere. They are a part of the story. And here is the reality, that from time to time, everybody in this room play the role of the snake. All of us, at some point, in some context, play the role of the snake. I don't really want to hear that. It's humorous when we talk about snakes in the church and snakes here and snakes there and snake in your home, as long as you ain't identified as the snake. But at some point, every individual in this room played the role of the snake. And then after the fall, you have the first human hierarchy. God didn't create it. He just revealed it to the humans that this is your new reality. He said, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, talking to the snake. Down on your belly, you will eat the dust for the rest of your days. And I will put enmity, I will put animosity, anger, rage between the rungs. Between the rung of the serpent, who is at the bottom, and the next rung above the serpent is the woman. And I'm going to put enmity between your rung, the lowest rung, and the higher rung, which is the woman. This is hierarchy, y'all. It's going to be a problem between the rungs. And we see it all the time. Problems between the rungs. That is, the person on the bottom rung is always trying to usurp the authority of the person on the rung above them. And the person on the rung above them values their position in the hierarchy so much so that I'm going to keep you in your place. You ever heard of that? I'm going to put you in your place. Stay in your place. That is always somebody on a higher rung preaching or talking to somebody on a lower rung. Stay in your place. Don't try to transcend this rung to get on my level, because you are invading my place on this hierarchy. So guess what the word says? And the seed of the woman, his heel will crush the head of the serpent, and his heel will crush his head, and his head will bruise his heel. In other words, if I have to put my foot on your head to keep you beneath me, I will bruise myself to keep you in your place. And that's why there's so much brutality in many of our organizations, including the church. We talk about corporate America and how cutthroat it is, how people are always trying to usurp the authority to try to get to the top. It is a zoo. It's a jungle. People walking around with $3,000 suits on in a beautiful plush office building, but it's a jungle. Because people are trying to usurp their authority, somebody else's authority above them, and trying to climb to the top, and will do anything to anybody to get to the top. And it's not just in corporate America, it's in the church. Things come out when we start talking about positions. This person can't do this. This person can't do that. Why? Because I said so, and I'm the president. It's my authority. As soon as we get them, if you can't handle power. And it's difficult to handle power if you're talking about power in hierarchical arrangements. So now you have the woman above the serpent, keeping her foot on his head to keep him from transcending his subordinate place in this hierarchical arrangement. And then the verse says, to the woman, you will be subjected to your husband and he will rule over you. So now you have this first hierarchy, and the ranking metric is gender, with the man at the top, the female beneath him, and the gender ambiguous serpent beneath her. Why do you say gender ambiguous? Because when you see a snake slithering toward you, you don't know if it's a male or a female. And there are some people nowadays you see coming at you. You just don't know. You don't know. You know, and I'm not making jokes about trans people. People are people. People are human beings made in the image and likeness of God. They're human beings. But the truth is, sometimes, you know, when we have people joining our church, you know, they walk down, and I used to say as they come, God bless you, son, God bless you, or God bless you, daughter, God bless. One Sunday, and it happened on more than one occasion, one Sunday someone came walking down, and I'm thinking one thing and it's something else. And I said, God bless you, son, God bless you. He came down, and as I was shaking his hand at the front, he says, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. And I said, I'm sorry. I apologize. You know, I didn't know. You know, gender ambiguous. The serpent was at the bottom, and we see that playing out in our society right now. How many of us put trans people at the bottom and want to put our foot on their head to keep them in their place? Hierarchy. So the first human hierarchy that came into existence in terms of power relationships was the ranking metric was gender, with the man at the top, the woman beneath him, and the gender ambiguous serpent was at the bottom. Hierarchy. And there is always confusion in that type of model. And it's demonic. It is the basis of the domination system. That's the origin of the domination system. What is a domination system? It is a hierarchical arrangement where the powerful is at the top, and as that hierarchy descends, the less powerful, when you get to the bottom, the less powerful of all is at the bottom. And there are several different ranking metrics. Age, in some cultures, is a ranking metric. The older the person is, the more respect, the more privilege. And as that hierarchy descends, the younger has lesser respect, lesser privilege, lesser access. That was in the biblical culture. But the beauty is that God is not restricted to man-made cultural practices. Because the culture says that the oldest one is supposed to have all of the benefits and the privilege more so than the youngest one at the bottom. Just because we say that doesn't mean God says it. Sometimes God honors it, sometimes God doesn't. God moves where God wants to move, and God does what he wants to do. That's God. And God is always subverting our cultural paradigm, always subverting it. Always throwing a monkey wrench in what we think we got figured out. God would throw a monkey wrench in it and mess everything up. Talking about age as a ranking metric. Some smart folks say that Esau and Jacob was the younger, Esau was the older, and they argue that birthright should have been given to Esau, and it was given to Esau. But Jacob is the younger. How come Jacob got to be the son of promise when it should have gone to Esau? Here's the answer: because God can do whatever God wants to do. God is not subjected to your cultural standards. Even though you say as a culture that it should have gone to Esau, that ain't what God said. So God subverted it and said, no, I'm going to do the very opposite of what your culture said. I'm going to pick the youngest son, and I'm going to make him the son of promise. I'm going to make him the father of the Israelite community. I'm going to make him, because I can do whatever I feel like doing, because I'm God. And we have to honor that. We have to honor that. And so in most of our families, we see this age ranking piece, and that is one that is based on power. For example, in my household, it was age and gender as the ranking metric for the domination system in my household. Dad was at the top. He had all the power, all the privilege. He came and went as he pleased. Didn't have any accountability to anybody because he's at the top. Beneath him was my mother, the woman. She had some power, but not as much as Dad. So you see, as this hierarchy descends, the less powerful the people become. Beneath my mother were 8 children. And in that 8 children, the oldest, my brother, had more privilege than the rest of us in that hierarchy. That's the way it worked. More privilege. He was more deferenced and reverenced than the rest of us. He got the best clothes, the best shoes, the best gifts, and there is 7 years between my brother and me. 7 years. And it's different now that both of us are old. That gap doesn't seem to be as significant. But when you're young and there's a 7-year gap, that means when I'm 10, he's 17. That's a big gap. It's not so, that seems so big now. But when you're 17, I'm 10. You're way bigger than me. So why am I wearing your hand-me-down clothes? Your hand-me-down shoes? I can't fit his clothes now or his shoes. I'm too big for that now. So there's that. So the question is, and I came in the middle. So that means I had 3 siblings above me who had more power, access, and privilege. But I had 4 beneath me over whom I had more power, access, and privilege. How do we manage that power? How do we deal with it? And all of us are in some relationship. In many instances, it's based upon ranking. And how do we manage that power? What do we do with it? Are we good stewards over it? Probably not, because it's difficult to be a good steward of power when that power is displayed in a hierarchical domination system. Inevitably, somebody is going to abuse their power. And if you're not careful when you abuse that power, when someone confronts you about the power that you have abused, you might get offended. Because you will say, I deserve it. It's supposed to be this way. No, it's not supposed to be this way. Hierarchical power relationships are of the devil. Remember, God created all of us equally. But after the fall, we fell into this hierarchical power relationship, and we have normalized it, sacralized it, and spiritualized it. Since I'm the oldest, I'm supposed to have this position. Says who? The devil. Because that ain't what God said. God said y'all are equal. And you know what? Jesus, man, our Lord was so revolutionary that it's sometimes disturbing. Jesus subverted all kinds of hierarchical power relationships, which had become normalized in the ancient Israelite community. Jesus subverted all of them. Turn to the book of Matthew. We're in Bible study, right? Turn to Matthew chapter 23, I think. Let's see. Is it chapter 23? Matthew chapter 23. Can somebody Google it, please? Wait a minute. Okay, yeah, I'm right. I'm in there. Chapter 23, verse 8. Listen to what the master says. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. Do not call anyone on earth Father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be the servant. What is Jesus doing here? He is challenging hierarchical power arrangements. He said, don't call anybody rabbi, because y'all are brothers. What does that mean? When I call you rabbi, that's a position of authority and exaltation. So if I walk up to you and call you rabbi, that means I fall into my place automatically in that power relationship. That means I put the rabbi above me and I become subordinate to the rabbi. He said, don't call anybody on earth Father. You got one Father. Why not? Because when I call you Father, I exalt you above myself and I fall into my subordinate role in that father, son, daughter relationship. Don't call anybody instructor. Why? Because when I call you an instructor, I affirm your exalted position over me, because if you are the instructor, that means I'm the student. And student-instructor relationships are hierarchical. It places the instructor above the student. Jesus is challenging hierarchical power arrangements. That's hard. I mean, don't call nobody rabbi, because a rabbi is not over you. And to call him rabbi affirms his exalted position in that one-on-one relationship. I automatically reverence you. That does not mean Jesus is saying don't disrespect him, but you don't disrespect anybody. Not just your rabbi. Oops. I didn't mean to say that. Rev was standing right there. What if you can't say it in front of Rev? You ought not be saying it in front of anybody. I don't mean to be acting like that in front of Rev. What if you can't act like that? Don't exalt me. We're equal. That's what Jesus said. You don't exalt somebody, because when you exalt somebody, you interrupt, you spoil the original design decree that God had for us to be on equal plane. And it's hard for the person that has historically been exalted. That sounds good for the person who has been abased. So now, Jesus, you are saying that I ain't got to be running up to a rabbi, bowing down? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Because he's on the same level as you. That sounds good for the person at the bottom, but that's going to be challenged by the rabbi. Let's translate that into 2024 and replace rabbi with reverend. Don't call anybody reverend. Don't call them pastor. So now you walk in and say, hey, Theron, what am I going to say? Well, I'm going to say, hey, how you doing? You know, that is my name. You know, and when pastor comes around and you're behaving in a certain kind of way, you know, you tend to kind of curtail your behavior. But then when pastor walks up, you continue that behavior to her. Hey, Theron, what's up? I was just talking about what you preached at church on Sunday. Sometimes pastors will go ballistic. Don't call me by my name. I'm Dr. So-and-so. I'm Reverend. I'm Pastor so-and-so. Jesus said, don't call him rabbi. He's so revolutionary, so radical. And he said, don't call nobody father. You got one father, and he's in heaven. So Theo walks up to me and said, hey, Theron, the first, what's up? And notice Jesus never called Mary mother. Check it out. The first time we see him encountering his mother is when he was 12 years old in the temple. They had left him there. They thought he was in a caravan. They had been to the Passover. He was in Jerusalem. They looked among his family and they didn't see him. He was gone for a couple of days. They rushed back from Galilee back to Jerusalem looking for their son. They go to the temple and he's in there kicking it with the scholars. And she says to him, you worried us. Why did you do this to us? He said, didn't you know I would be about my father's business? He didn't say mother. When the wine ran out, the second encounter we see with Jesus and his mother, when the wine ran out and Jesus' mother came to him and said, the wine has run out, Jesus said to her, woman, what is that to me? He didn't say mother. When he was on the cross dying the third time, he told John, John, behold your mother. Woman, behold your son. He didn't say my mother. He said your mother. Because Jesus was not buying into this hierarchical arrangement, even in family. But when you look at when he was 12 years old, the narrative says, and he went back to Galilee and he submitted himself to his parents. When you're a kid, you better submit yourself to your parent. But when you are grown, the nature of that relationship changes. That's why Jesus said in another instance, he said, I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against his mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. What do you mean, Jesus? You coming in here to tear up families? No. What I mean is I'm coming here to explain to people that people who played the role in society as the dominated person, when I come, I want to rechange that so that there is no domination in our relationships. I don't care if it's mother or daughter, father or son. When that daughter or son becomes grown, the nature of that relationship changes. You don't get to dominate me at 30 the way you did when I was 6. The relationship changes. That's radical. And so the way I interact with my son, of course, there's still an air of deference for me because I'm his father. But we communicate and talk like men. I respect him as a man. My son is 35. He has 2 children and a wife and a full-time job and another. He's a man. And so when he asks to borrow money, I don't treat him like he's 16. I treat him like he's 35. You have to give my money back when you say it. If we're going to relate like that on a equal basis, it has to be equal across the board. So that's what Jesus is saying. This whole hierarchical domination piece, it has to be erased because it is the root of all problems. It's problems everywhere. And so that's what David is dealing with. He's having a tough time managing his power. They're at war. Fighting a war David started. David is at home in the temple at the palace chilling. Wakes up from a nap, walks out on his roof and looks over and sees Bathsheba. She's bathing. And some people want to blame Bathsheba for that. Well, why was she out there bathing? Because that's where her bathtub is. Well, why was she bathing at that time? She had just come off her menstrual cycle and she was taking a bath. That's what the Bible said. That's why. So don't put that on her. She's doing what she probably did every day, bathing. David looked over and saw her, and the Bible said she was very beautiful. David asked about her. Who is that? They told him who her daddy was and who her husband was. It should have stopped there. But David obviously, throughout his career, displayed a weakness for certain women. That was his weakness. Deal with your weaknesses, because if you don't, they disintegrate to wickedness. You're weak in this area. If you keep indulging your weaknesses and not deal with them, at some point, they move from weakness to wickedness. David became downright wicked because he didn't control his weakness for Bathsheba. The record is, she comes in, comes under his embrace, she becomes pregnant. I do not like how this story is narrated. That's why I tell y'all all the time, I wrestle with the Bible. I do. I wrestle with it. There are some things that bother me, and I tell God, I'm bothered by this, God. I don't like the way they did. But I understand the misogynistic and sexist society out of which the Bible emerged. Nevertheless, I don't like the way Bathsheba is the main character in this story, and she has one speaking role. You know what it is? I'm pregnant. That's all she said. We don't know if she liked David or not. David may have been disgusting to her. David may have been just belligerent to her. She may have not even liked him. But we don't know that because the Bible doesn't tell us how Bathsheba felt about it. We wouldn't know that because the Bible doesn't even tell us how Bathsheba felt about the encounter. The Bible said that he sent for her, she came up, and he slept with her. That's it. What did Bathsheba think? But when you are living in a domination system, you know your place and you fall right into place. You don't even think about it. We've been living the domination system, this hierarchical power relationship for so long that you know your place and you just fall right into your place. And I'm being transparent. I've been pastoring for over 40 years. It's all I've ever done in my adult life. And when people come, we're talking, they fall right into their place as a subordinate to their pastor. And the pastor falls right into his place as a superior person in that exchange. We've been conditioned to do it. Bathsheba fell right into her place. We see that in military. We see that in police agencies. That the person in superior rank, when that person walks in the room, the persons that's beneath them fall right into place. The respect, the deference is just automatic. In police agencies, the person at the top comes to a person that's subordinate, they fall right into place. Don't even think about it. I'm falling right into place. And somebody might ask, well, how do you expect a military to work if there is no rank? It'll be chaotic. How would a police department work if there were no rank? It would be crazy, right? But if you didn't have a domination system, you wouldn't need a military or a police force. Because inherent in domination system is disorder and violence. That's why you need a military, because we live in a domination system. That's why you need a police force, because we live in a domination system. If we can collapse this domination system, which is what Jesus came to challenge, you would need a military or would you need a police force, because you will have no violence. And so here's David. Shows up, the woman shows up, has no speaking voice. She comes under his embrace. She becomes pregnant. That's because of David's weakness. Now watch how wicked this brother becomes. First, he wants to blame the baby on Uriah. Now Bathsheba already told him, I'm pregnant and it's your baby. But now you're going to go get Uriah and put the baby on him. Bathsheba know who the baby daddy is. And she's not expected to say anything about it. But she knows her place in the domination system. She knows her place. She ain't gonna say nothing. Why? Because she ain't supposed to say nothing. Why? Because she's a woman at the bottom of the domination system. I don't say anything. I just sit here and look cute and don't voice my opinion. I don't talk. I don't say anything. Uriah shows up, wash your feet, and go home. He just knew he was going to go home and sleep with Bathsheba. She's beautiful, and it's his wife. But the brother is so committed to David, and he's so committed to Israel, and he's so committed to his comrades who are out on the front line fighting, that he said, I can't go home and enjoy my wife, eat and drink, when I know that my fellow soldiers are out there sleeping in tents. And Joab, my general, is out there sleeping in an open field. And I'm going to go home and I'm going to eat and drink and sleep with my... No, I ain't going to do that. So he slept outside David's house. The next morning they came and told David what Uriah had done. And David becomes even more wicked. I'm going to get him drunk. And surely he'll go home to his wife then. He's drunk. But that didn't work either. So David, the worst thing in my opinion, he has ever done, he wrote a letter to assassinate Uriah and gave the letter to Uriah to give to Joab. Put his assassination papers in his own hands. Because David knew that Uriah was so committed to him that he would dare breach the confidence between the king and the general by reading the letter. He knew Uriah wouldn't read the letter. He knew it. And gave it to him. Your assassination papers. Here, take this to Joab. The brother is assassinated at David's request. But here is something even more egregious. That Joab had already planned how he would work the military. He had already had his stuff in place. He had already seized the city. But when he received the letter from the king, he's got to rethink his whole military strategy to accommodate the selfish motives of the king. I got to rethink my whole thing. He rethinks it. He does what his king tells him to do. Not only did Uriah die, but other people were killed as a result of what David had done, trying to cover his sin. David had this reputation among the people of Israel. And David wanted to keep that reputation clean, even if it meant having people killed. People died because of David. How do you handle your power? What do you do with it? And all of us got some David in us, some villain. But here is the redemption. Here is the redemption. You have to stay in 2 Samuel. What was that, chapter 11? The redemption comes in chapter 12. When, verse 1, then the Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, there were two men in a certain town, one rich and one poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except a little ewe lamb that he had bought. He raised it, he grew it up. It grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for the lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity. Then Nathan said to him, you are the man. Approach the king with prophetic criticism. And we have people in our lives who love us enough and love God enough to tell us when we're wrong. If you don't have that type of person in your life, who are you surrounding yourself with? You need somebody who would tell you the truth about the villain that lurks in you. You need that person because nobody in this room is perfect. And everybody in this room at one point or another has a villain that emerged within us and sabotage us. You need somebody to tell you when you're wrong, when you're on the wrong side. Thank God Nathan was that for David. David repented. And what is that? What psalm is that when we hear David's repentance? When he says, Psalm 51. That's David's repentance. When he says, create in me a clean heart and renew within me the right spirit. That came as a result of Nathan's prophetic rebuke against David to put David back in line, put him back in the hero status, take him out of the villain status and put him back right in the hero status where he belonged and where all of you belong. You belong in the heroine hero status, not with the villains. But if you don't have someone in your life that can check you, that loves you enough, that can rebuke you when you go bad, then you need to get somebody. Power. How do you manage power? What do you do with it? And it's in every relationship. I say this and I close. I was, when I was working on my doctorate in Chicago, it was in pastoral counseling. And one of the things we had to do, we had to counsel people. And it was a part of our practicum. And I was paired with a young couple who had been having problems. They had just got married. And they had been having problems. And I was in conversation with them about the problem. And I asked them, what types of stuff that goes on in your marriage that creates these problems. And he was giving me an example. He said, for example, Doc, when we first got married, I had my place, she had her place, and we agreed that we would get something neutral, not hers, not mine, but neutral. I said, okay, that's cool. And then we moved in. We're married and all that. We move in, and we set our bedroom up. And this is before the days of cell phones. I'm going to tell you how long ago that was. And we set our bedroom up. And our bedroom, the headboard is against the wall, and our bed is there. On either side, on one side of the bed is a lampstand, is a nightstand. On the nightstand is a lamp and the telephone. And they were fighting over who was going to sleep on that side of the bed that controlled the lights in the room and the telephone. That was a point of contention. Both of them, somebody looking at me like, y'all, yeah, I know what it is. Both of them wanted that side of the bed. Why? You're in control. That's where the remote for the television was. That's where the phone was. That's where the light was. I control the TV, the phone, and the lights by sleeping on this side of the bed. So I said, okay. Now you do know they have splitters on phones. Get another phone. Put it on that side of the bed. Get an extension cord. Get you another nightstand and have 2 lights and 2 phones. And then y'all just fight over the remote control. They didn't want that. You know why? Because that would have empowered both of them. One of them wanted to be the powerful one, and one of them wanted the other to be the subordinate. That characterized everything. That spoke about where they were in their marriage. Fighting for supremacy. Who's going to be over whom? I'm gonna run this. No, you ain't. I'm gonna run this. You know, that was the nature of that was in 92. I don't even know I wonder how they're making out. Hope they were able to push past that and work things out. And then this whole question again of hierarchy, you know, and we put God in the wrong place. You know, we put him in the wrong place. Here's where we put him. And y'all, God, family, career, church, blah, blah. It goes all the way down hierarchically, right? So you are always struggling where to put your priority. God is at the top. Family, career, church, friends, blah, 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 all the way down. So you're always struggling which one gets most of my attention. You know, because if I'm giving my attention to my family, and in my case as a pastor, then that's going to take away from what I contribute to my church. Or if I'm giving my church too much, I neglect my family. And so we are always struggling how we prioritize. And the reason we struggle with that prioritization is because where we have placed God and how we have ordered our lives hierarchically. So there will always be a conflict in the different activities of your life because of how you placed it in this hierarchy. What if you changed the structure and put God at the center and everything revolves around God? Just change the way you think about it. Change the way you structure it. Remove the hierarchies, because hierarchies are evil. They always create conflict. I don't care where the hierarchy is. They create conflict. But if you change that paradigm and put God at the center and let family, church, career, all of that revolve around God, making the whole thing a spiritual practice, that God can get just as much glory out of my life hanging with my family than he can working at a church. That God can get just as much glory out of my life hanging out with my friends or working at my career, because it's a spiritual practice. God is at the center, not at the top. And that's the whole reality of Emmanuel. Not God above us, not God beneath us, but God where? With us. All right. Thank y'all for tuning in. Meet us again next week, same place, same time. And we thank God for you. We're signing off. Now, do we have any questions? Yes, sir.
I think you just answered it. But